I don't know about you, but when the Olympic Games is on, I find one of the most enjoyable things to do is to get into a really obscure sport I'm not familiar with. One of the first questions that comes to mind when you watch a new sport is always the same. What's the aim of the game? Only once we understand the point can we have any hope of understanding what the game is about and actually start to enjoy watching it. Now, it struck me recently that this is the same for life in general. What is life all about? What is life's purpose? It's a fundamental question that has always puzzled humanity. As we feel a good answer will probably help us to enjoy the game a little bit more. Now, no one seems to have the definitive answer, and we all have our own hash job at answering ourselves. We all get on with the busyness of life, but I doubt anyone would deny that they sometimes ponder, even if only briefly, what it's all about. In the 21st century, what answers can Christianity possibly hold for us? If you believe the media that's constantly thrown at us, Christianity is a dying dogma full of outdated ideas, only followed by the weak in need of a crutch in life. Outmaneuvered by science and reason, it now stands for nothing but an outdated relic. We can work out the answers we need without it. Thank you very much. And yet the questions remain. Are we any closer to fulfillment as a society since we have jettisoned Jesus? Now, there are a lot of things we can try to replace Christianity with, such as consumerism, pursuing wealth. Yet studies show that increased wealth has coincided with decreased happiness, higher crime, loneliness, and suicide rates. The list goes on. The world's answers to human questions are not working. So it seems important to look again at Christianity, not the ignorant half-truths the media feeds us, but what Christianity really claims and really offers. We hope this will create the opportunity to discuss, to bring our own questions, and to hear other people's stories. Even if you feel you've heard it all before, wherever you are on your journey of faith and discovery, I believe passionately that Christianity is worth discovering and investigating further, as it promises a unique and compelling answer to life's biggest questions. Now, it doesn't ignore the complexity of the questions that we all ask, but it doesn't leave us in a sea of meaningless either. You may disagree with me, and that's absolutely fine, but let me challenge you to examine this with me, even if just to understand it more, or even just to prove it wrong. After all, what have you got to lose? Now then, I've tried to condense these reasons to explore Christianity for yourself into 6 sporting images. So here's the first one. I want you to imagine that you were on a walk in the park and came across a clear area with shorter grass and various white patterns painted onto it. On closer inspection, you notice that these lines are not random but uniform, often straight and symmetrical. Shortly, 22 people came out onto the grass and started playing football, spreading out across the marked area and stopping once play went over the edge of it. Now, the various boxes, lines and circles seem to correspond perfectly with the rules of how the game worked and how the players behaved. Now consider this. Would it be more logical to assume that these marked lines were intentionally placed to enhance the enjoyment of the game, or that they just appeared by complete chance? It doesn't require rejection of strong scientific theories such as the Big Bang or evolutionary theory to apply this idea to the natural world that we find ourselves in. For example, the expansion of matter at the beginning of the universe had to occur at the right rate, fast enough to avoid a big crunch, but slow enough to allow for the formation of planets in order for life to arise. And it did. Life would not be possible if the force of the Big Bang explosion had differed by the minutest degree. Similarly, life would not be possible if the force binding protons to neutrons differed even slightly. There are many, many such necessary conditions, each making it less and less likely that the universe satisfies these conditions just by chance, which we must assume if there is no creator behind it. Now, a colleague of Professor Stephen Hawking, mathematical physicist Sir Roger Penrose, took the time to estimate the total probability of the occurrence of a universe in which life can be formed. He came up with a number, and that number is 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 123 to 1. Now, it's difficult to get our heads around these kind of numbers sometimes, but let's just have a think. That's not even 123 zeros. That's 10 to the power of 123 number of zeros. Now, to put that into a picture, even if we were to write a 0 on each separate particle in the universe, we would fall far short of writing down the figure needed. In probability theory, odds of less than 1 in 10 to the power of 50 equals 0 probability. Penrose's number is more than 1 trillion times less than that. It seems to me to require more faith to believe that this happened by chance than to believe that it was instigated by an incredibly powerful mind. We're talking about hitting the jackpot over and over again, constantly nailing extremely unlikely, mutually complementary parameters of constants and quantities far past the point where chance could account for it. But if these numbers don't convince you, then honestly, just consider the complex world we are in. While it may develop and evolve, is it really logical that it arrived by complete chance from completely nothing? That a universe exists, that it has stars and planets and black holes, that plants and life exists, that our planet Earth, so perfectly placed with all its life forms, exists. If we are to follow the logic, then the vastly powerful being behind everything we see around us demands our further investigation. The second image is, of course, Michael Jordan. Now, it doesn't have to be Michael Jordan, of course. Be it a Jordan airborne dunk from the free throw line, a whipped forehand down the line by Federer, a dazzling dribble and finish from Lionel Messi, or an effortless straight drive by Sachin Tendulkar. There are moments in sport that can leave us speechless as we marvel at their perfection, their beauty. Similarly, there are sights and experiences in life that leave us stunned and in awe in a similar way. The world is full of beauty in nature, in relationships, in acts of kindness, and in human creativity. They all speak of something beyond the day-to-day that we can't quite put our finger on. But consider this: does a bird grasp the beauty of the savannah it glides through? Does a cat weep at the birth of its offspring? As human beings, we are endowed with an innate appreciation of the beauty in the world around us. It's appreciated in different ways by different people, but we all have it. We can't fully name it, and it goes far beyond biology or emotion. Some things just take us beyond ourselves and leave us in silent awe. In those moments, whatever we've intellectually convinced ourselves, we get the feeling that there has to be more than just a bunch of random atoms flying around. Christianity offers answers as to where this beauty comes from and why we sense it so strongly and so profoundly. Which brings us on to our third image, the referee. Despite this beauty, we all know that the world is broken. It often seems deeply wrong and unfair to us. We know that the strong oppress the weak, the evil people prosper, whilst innocents suffer. Like a player appealing to the referee to act and to make things right again, our hearts cry out for hope, for justice, for a meaning to it all. We struggle with eternity. We push away the concept of death at every possibility. Christianity, in a way no other religion or philosophy can, deals with these issues. God's answer is one of justice, breathtaking love, self-sacrifice, and hope. It's an answer like none other, and it deserves our consideration. Fourthly is the picture of a scorebook. Now, as a young player for Broughton and North Newington Cricket Club under-13s, which I might add is the height of my cricketing abilities, I was fascinated by the volunteer who used to sit in a tiny room above the changing rooms and record in a red book the results of every delivery. Kept for posterity, these scorebooks can be read years later to accurately report how matches played out. Another reason that we can and should investigate Christianity is the fact that we have 4 independent accounts describing the events of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. From a historical basis, this means that Jesus' life can be regarded as one of the most reliable ancient events known to us. Now, it's easy just to dismiss these accounts as made up or unreliable, and many do without really looking into it with any integrity whatsoever. So here are 4 reasons why it is rationally believed that the gospel accounts found in the Bible are credible and reliable. Firstly, they're written early. Evidence suggests from around 20 years after the Easter events. To modern ears, this may sound a long time, particularly in our world of instant news. But in the first century, dominated by an oral storytelling tradition, this was incredibly quick. Historical accounts of Alexander the Great were written down by historians living over 400 years after his death, and these are not seriously questioned by scholars of that period. So 20 years after the event is incredibly quick and suggests a good level of historical credibility. Secondly, they're well supported by strong archaeological evidence and, crucially, from non-Christian history. Jewish, Roman and Greek historians record Jesus as a real man who was alive at the time the Gospel accounts were recorded. He is called a great man who did wondrous things. These historians have no obvious agenda other than reporting the historical happenings. Again, this level of validation is largely unheard of in the history of the time, making the Gospels incredibly reliable sources by usual standards. Third is the huge number of copies available. Due to how events were recorded in that time, a general rule is that the more manuscript copies surviving today, and the earlier they can be dated to, the more reliable the account is. Now, as sports fans, maybe we'll enjoy a league table, so let's have a look. As a comparison, we have 10 decent copies of manuscripts recording Caesar's Gallic War from 800 years after he lived. Homer's Iliad is considered very well preserved, with 650 copies from some 1,000 years after the original. But by far the most well-preserved document of that era, however, is the Gospel accounts, with over 24,000 copies dated from between 70 and 170 years after the original. A fragment of John's Gospel is believed to be just 30 years after the original. Look at that table. It makes Man City's lead in the Premier League look tight. There is simply no comparison. The historical fidelity of these documents cannot be dismissed. Finally, there is no motive to lie. Now, criminal barristers will tell you that people will lie, indeed they will commit any crime, for 3 reasons only: money, sex, power. It's a common argument made against the gospel writers that they just made it up for their own ends. But ask yourself why. Did any of Jesus' followers or members of the early church who interviewed them and recorded their accounts gain money, sex or power by lying? Quite the opposite. They were routinely jailed and beaten by the authorities. They were rejected completely by their communities. And all of the disciples died horrible deaths as punishment for telling others of the life and teachings of Jesus. Now, some people may be thinking at this point, many people have willingly died for many different faiths. That doesn't prove anything. You'd be right. Famously, in Jonestown in 1978, over 900 people died drinking poison Kool-Aid in the name of their religion. But listen to this. What makes the martyrdom of Jesus' 12 disciples unique in history is that while others may die for what they believe or what others have taught them, only the disciples of Jesus died for what they knew to be either true or false. If they were lying about Jesus' life, death and resurrection, as some say, then why would they die for what they knew to be a lie? If they knew that they had hidden the body on Easter morning and they were living a lie, you would expect them to take the opportunities given to them to back down and stay alive. But they didn't. Furthermore, St. Paul, a leader of the early church, positively gave up his position of authority within the Jewish leadership once he encountered Jesus to devote his life to telling the world of what he'd discovered. He experienced poverty, beatings, shipwreck, stonings and finally beheading, all of which he could have avoided if he'd have kept his comfortable position. The wonderful thing is that you can investigate this man Jesus, his life, his words and his actions, and make up your own mind. So don't just take the ignorant media's word for it. Get hold of a gospel account and read it for yourself. Make up your own mind. Fifthly, a coach. Christianity offers a guide for how to live a fulfilling life. Now, if you think that humanity has moved past such things as far as being told what to do with your life, just have a look at the magazine rack in the newsagents or see what clickbait lifestyle ads pop up on social media. Christianity offers time-proven practical wisdom on everything that matters in our lives, including money, family, social justice, sex, our environment, how to cope with worry. The list is endless. Our society has tried to push the Bible into irrelevance without ever actually reading it. If you actually get to grips with this blueprint for a fulfilling, fair and fruitful human life with real purpose, you can see how our society is crying out for biblical wisdom. Even if you've never read the Bible before, why not give it a go? What have you got to lose? Even better, take the next step of living the way the Bible suggests and test for yourself the biblical guide for life. Investigate for yourself and make your own conclusion. Finally, number 6, the sports stadium. Now, what's the best sporting atmosphere you've ever been in? Some people might say the Anfield Kop at 5-3 on match day. Some might say India versus Pakistan in a test match. Some might say Cardiff's Millennium Stadium with the roof on. We've all experienced an electric atmosphere. But let me tell you that all these are a pale imitation of the sensation of knowing God's presence in your life. It's not always like that, of course. Any sports fan knows that there's ups and downs, but the moments of sheer joy and peace the Christian experiences are incomparable to anything else. Now, I've studied psychology, I've watched Derren Brown, I've experienced herd mentality and emotional euphoria at stadium gigs and at live sporting moments. But as you can only know if you experience both, God's presence is so much more than these moments, which are largely focused on personal sensations and a shared experience with those around us. And by definition, words fail you when you try and explain that sense of God's presence, but it's something about a sudden awareness of the hugeness of God, his limitless love, and a glimpse of his wonderful purposes in our lives. Not just in the mountaintop moments, but in the very real everyday knowledge of a God who loves and promises to always be with us. The Christian knows this experience as intimate, beautiful, and liberating. So there we have it. We've explored 6 good reasons why Christianity is worth it investigating. Those who have investigated for themselves and are now living this life know how amazingly simple yet complex it is, how it turns the world on its head and it seems so crazy, but also makes so much sense. Now we know that it's always essential to investigate something for yourself before making a judgment about it. Christianity is a game changer to billions of people across the world. Will you come on this journey as we give it a fair hearing and explore why that might be, even if just to prove it wrong? So let's reconsider those 6 images that we've covered: design, beauty, justice, history, guidance, and presence. And let me ask you these questions. Which do you find the most convincing? Why? Which do you find the least convincing, and why? And what questions came to mind about Christianity that you'd like to have the opportunity to discuss?